That's falsing on, I think it was K-band, even though it has the K-band filter on and it is in full logic mode. Escort remains silent. Escort is showing KA band alert. Nothing for Valentine 1. And 2 false K bands on the Valentine 1. This is a January of 2017 Valentine 1. It was just delivered directly from Valentine 1. And this is a 2-year-old Escort Passport 9500 IX. I'm just going over a couple of differences between these detectors. I've tried a Valentine 1 in the past, about 10 years ago, and it just had too much noise, so I ended up returning it. But I've heard so many good things about the latest model. It's January 2017 with the junk K filter that I said, well, let's give it another try. And there you go, there's a K false alarm, even though it has the junk K filter on with the Valentine 1. The Escort is, again, quiet. So one of the issues appears to be multiple false alarms on both K and X band driving anywhere suburban to urban, anywhere that's not a completely rural route. After about a half an hour of driving, the 9500 IX has yet to false alarm at all. And the Valentine 1, I would say I haven't been able to drive more than 2 minutes without getting multiple bogey false alarms. There was a very interesting situation that came up, which is that the Valentine 1 was falsing on K-band, and it was showing multiple bogeys. The Escort was quiet. Then all of a sudden the Escort started just barking like crazy, KA band. And the Valentine 1 did shift over to KA band, although it was very hard to notice. You'll see the indicators that indicate what band are very tiny LED lights, and they're all the same color. They're all red. So the only thing you'd be able to see is a small LED light next to a indicator for KX, KAL. It's very hard to see. So that made it so that I was pretty much already ignoring the Valentine 1 because it was falsing so much, and then a real hit happened, and I would have completely missed it. I wouldn't have even noticed it on the Valentine 1. With the Escort, it was completely quiet, and then visually KA band pops up on the screen and you start getting a lot of noise. So you can actually see, on the Escort, it will actually, read the letters KA to let you know. And it's also a very loud and distinct, KA band alert. So, that's an interesting positive and negative that I'm finding here right now. And there's a false on K-band again, so that's a K-band false, which I was kind of hoping that the K-bands would be better filtered on this newer unit. It does X-band also a lot of probably doors, I would assume. That's what it seems to be falsing on a lot of. Now here, the Escort is picking up KA band, the Valentine 1 is staying quiet again. So we're going to see, is the Escort falsing on KA band? That's a good question. Or is there a police officer kind of popping off and on here? I'm going to be on the lookout, and we'll see if the Valentine 1 is ignoring a real threat, or if the Escort, now the Valentine 1 has just started picking up KA. You'll see the signal strength is very low. The Escort picked it up really quite a, you see it's popping off there. So let's see if we have a law enforcement here up ahead somewhere. I suspect we do. and we happen to be in rush hour traffic right now, so it's pretty common for them to be kind of doing shift changes right now and driving along here. This is a kind of a regular kind of suburban road that during non-traffic times it moves along pretty darn quickly, and right now this would be probably the highest traffic time you'd see. So yeah, we definitely have a police officer up ahead that's coming at us. Both of them now are getting really strong, and as you can see, really strong. And so that was a threat. That's a legitimate threat. We're probably going to be getting ready to pass him now. And you can see they both are definitely seeing that threat. Now the Valentine one is neat that it's showing you that the threat probably just passed us. I'm able to see the officer over there. I'm not going to bother trying to film him or anything, but it looks like he just passed us. And if the threat goes down now, then that was probably him that had it on. So yeah, that was him. So, the Valentine one was great in that you could see the arrows, you could see him pass us. It did find the threat, but I gotta say, the Escort absolutely caught it first. By several seconds. And it's been quiet throughout the entire drive until that real threat happened. Whereas the Valentine one, I've actually kind of been learning to ignore the threats from it, because particularly if it had been falsing right there when that real threat came, I probably wouldn't even have noticed that it was KA band, that it had switched over from the other, false alarm. Interesting. And just some more false alarms there. That's a K-band false alarm on the Valentine one. See a lot of those. So just some ongoing thoughts. The Valentine one is in the full logic mode, which and also has, as it comes programmed now from the factory, with the junk K filter, or the traffic filter they're calling it. So my understanding is that out of the box settings, this would be, trying for it to be the quietest, setting for this. Now, people have talked about, segmenting bands, also people running units that plug into their OBD port so it can tell how fast the car is going and kind of quiet things down when it's going under a certain speed. So, for example, if you're driving under 45 miles an hour or whatever you want to set it at, you won't hear all of these junk alerts going off. Obviously, I talked to Valentine 1 about these false alarms, and they said, well, you should just learn the area that you're in and find out which band the police are using, and then just turn off, she suggested to turn off the X band, which actually I'm falsing a lot on the K. But, for somebody who enjoys driving and enjoys going to new locations and maybe trying out, food or different sites, that doesn't really work, because I certainly wouldn't want to disable an entire band that conceivably a small local department or whatever could be using. So and continued thoughts are that the this version of the Valentine one, which has better filters, again January 2017, is quite a bit better than the one from 10 years ago that I tested. And I know, trying to pull the memory banks, but the one 10 years ago, if we wanted to talk about, kind of false alarms on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 just being false alarms all the time, everywhere you're driving, and 1 being very, very quiet, and barely any, I would say the old Valentine one was pretty much a 9. I mean, it was really unusable in the city. It would have, if you lived in rural Montana or something, or driving on the freeway, it's probably fine. But really, other than that, even in suburban locations, not even in a city. But now, okay, so look, KA band. There we go. So we got KA band came on at the exact same time for both of them. So that's a good sign. really, now you can see that the Escort is actually quite a bit more sensitive to this genuine threat, once again, than the Valentine 1 is. In the city, where there's a lot of other noise, the Escort has been performing much better on genuine threats and in filtering. Obviously in filtering, no question. So the officer apparently just passed us, which again is pretty cool to see. Yep, there he did. He just went. Yep. So the Valentine 1 is actually better at picking up the signal behind me. It's still going off as the gentleman passed, the law enforcement officer. But, you know, honestly, the Escort in the city, or where there could be any noise present, is certainly picking up the threats much better, and then also is, you know, virtually dead silent when it comes to false alarms. So that really helps weed out signal versus noise, and to me it helps me trust the detector. When I hear the Escort go off, I hit the brakes. You don't, with the Valentine 1, I have to, number one, I have to start looking, okay, how many bogeys are there? Which band is it, which is very hard to see. It's, you know, again, it's very difficult to even see what band it is. And the arrows are really at that point almost a distraction, because it doesn't matter. If you have a detector that goes off only when there's a threat, it really doesn't matter where the threat's coming from. When you hear it go off, you hit the brakes, and that gets you, you know, safe and down to a reasonable speed. With a Valentine 1, you're spending several seconds actually trying to figure out if it's a real threat or not, and that's wasted time. And there it's falsing on K-band right now. So I don't know. It's possible. I don't know. I'm not in on a rural stretch of road that's straight without any, you know, distracting signals, and you know, studies from the internet anyway are showing that the Valentine 1 might be more sensitive, I guess, unless it's off axis, where it has a little bit more issue. But in the city or in a suburban area, here we're seeing that there's an absolute advantage to the Escort's filtering ability, and whether that comes also from the GPS that's in it as well. Just falsing alarm on K now, 2 false alarms on K, and just more falsing on K. And now it's falsing on K and X, so there you go, K and X. It's a very noisy detector. Now X, just X, and X and K. So, and then you can see the Escort's just quiet. It's kind of always quiet unless there's a real threat, which is great. So this is kind of one of those situations where that KA signal can hide in the false alarms. If there was a KA that had started going off during these falses, it's a little bit harder to catch. It's you know, particularly with the screen on this that really doesn't differentiate signals all that well. So, and just, yeah, a lot of falsing. These are K-band false alarms, and trying to see what car I just passed that was setting it off. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one. Nothing is looking like a a big suspect. Like I guess the Cadillac Escalades are ones that traditionally can even set off the Escort, although you see it's been completely quiet the whole time. But there are some Acuras, the newer Acuras, and I believe some of the new Hyundais are like Genesis type cars. The Buicks, so the GM models, that probably have more laser guidance or different sensors on them that are setting it off. But generally, the Escort, I would say on a scale again of 1 to 10 on false alerts, the Escort is probably more like a 1 or a 2. And this Valentine one, the newest, latest one, is probably a 6 or a 7. And again, the older one without that junk K filtering that I had was probably a 9, easily. I mean, it was just absolutely useless. This one is more quiet, but it's, honestly, it's not acceptable or really useful in this environment. Again, if I was in an area where there were no other sensors around that could be interfering with it, on a freeway, a lone highway, out in a rural area, the Valentine possibly could offer another couple seconds of warning, although probably unnecessary and it wouldn't really help you. But in any other environment, it just doesn't seem to be very useful compared to the detector that has a better filtering technology and can weed out those false threats. So just going to wrap things up. I think we have a pretty good idea of what's been going on with this detectors, and I hope it's helpful to people. I certainly don't mean to be overly critical of the Valentine 1. I really had some high hopes for it this time with the new filtering technology. What I would say is that I do like the packaging of it a lot. The arrows are extremely responsive, so as you can see somebody passing, like when we saw that police car passing, it was honestly, they actually switched just before he passed. So they're very, very quick and very to respond. So that's definitely a plus for the Valentine 1. I really like that. Obviously the negatives are that it's very, very noisy. It's not you can't trust it. So when it makes noise, usually it's not a threat. So meaning you don't have trust in the detector. Also the bands, the LEDs that indicate which band is alerting are tiny. They don't illuminate the actual band itself, so if it's dark out, you just see an LED light up. You have no idea. Again, the letter K or X or KA doesn't light up in any way at all. The script is extremely small, and the light is extremely small. The LED indicator is extremely small, and they're all the same color. So pretty useless. At the very least, just make the LEDs a different color. Differentiate them in some way. That I don't think would even take that much. You don't have to redesign the entire display. Just simply make them a different color. That's the positive. The 9500 IX that from Escort. Obviously, the positive is that it's quiet. It's when there's a real threat and it goes off. It's actually been more sensitive to real threats as well. So I guess what they would say off-axis KA band threats, which we've been seeing, which is a police officer kind of coming at us from an angle, it hit on a little bit quicker. And it shows, the severity of the threat. It's very good at showing the intensity of it as well. When KA band goes off with the Escort also, it's a very loud and distinct noise, so even if you had a different threat going on, the KA band will, it's very noticeable that it kind of comes over it, kind of like laser would be on the Valentine 1, and laser actually does that also on the Escort. It's also very piercing. It's actually terrible. So, that's kind of my wrap up. The 9500 IX, what is it missing? It's missing the arrows. I mean, the arrows are they're great. I think it is neat. They're not necessary, but they're neat. It's nice kind of seeing where the thread is, and being able to see kind of adds to the situational awareness. Will it help you get out of a ticket? No. I mean, with the Escort, if it starts making noise, I get on the brakes, period. It really doesn't matter where the threat's coming from. And I don't have to figure out where the threat's coming from to know if it's a false or not, because in the Escort's case, it's really almost never. But I like them. And so, the next try, unfortunately, will be the Max 360, which is the Escort that now has the arrows built into it. I was actually hoping that the Valentine one, with its new filtering technology, would really be it, and this is the one that I'll stick with for a while, but it's just not going to be useful to me, and I will probably be doing another comparison then with the Max 360 to see how that is versus the 9500 IX. I've heard reports that it's a little bit more noisy as well, and my understanding is that they might have taken care of that with an update. So we'll give that a test.